Parents will go to extraordinary lengths to keep their children protected. They work hard to create a safe and abundant life for their kids. When someone, especially a person they trust, puts their child in danger, it can break a parent. What's worst of all is when that parent seeks help from the legal system but fails to see justice put into action. What would you do if someone put your child's innocence in danger? How far would you go to protect them? In today's video, we're going to cover some gripping stories of parents who took justice into their own hands. The people in these stories faced unimaginable moral dilemmas, but ultimately, their child's well-being drove them to go above the law and take matters into their own hands. Throughout this video, we're going to cover 9 stories of parents who took revenge on their child's predator, from Andre Bamberski, who kidnapped his daughter's killer, to Annika McKenzie, who beat down her daughter's alleged abuser. Each story of vengeance has us asking, how far would you go to protect the ones you love? Our first story is the inspiration behind the Netflix documentary, My Daughter's Killer. When Kalinka Bamberski suddenly passed away, her father Andre Bamberski didn't believe it was an accident for a minute. His ex-wife Danielle told him that her husband Dieter Kronbach found Kalinka in bed unresponsive. Since he was a doctor, he allegedly tried to revive her by injecting her with stimulants. At least this is what he told her. However, autopsy reports showed something far more suspicious. These reports showed blood and a tear in her genitalia. The autopsy also gave signs that she died from asphyxiation, likely due to regurgitating the undigested food in her stomach. Andre had his suspicions about Dieter, and the autopsy set things into motion. But there was only one problem. The German prosecution had closed the case, stating that she died of natural causes. This wasn't going to stop Andre, though. He was determined to bring justice to his daughter's killer, even if it meant taking action into his own hands. He started off by handing out flyers and eventually got the French authorities involved. Since Kalinka was a French citizen, her body was exhumed and examined. This brought Dieter back to trial, where he was convicted of Kalinka's murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. While it may have seemed like things were off to a good start, there was one major problem. Dieter was in Germany and the country refused to extradite him. Dieter was able to walk around as a free man. However, this wasn't for long. Stories surfaced of the doctor drugging and abusing females, and he was eventually sent to prison. But Andre learned that he was released early and back at work. Andre had already hired private detectives and investigators to locate Dieter, but it wasn't enough. They discussed a plan to kidnap the doctor and ended up hiring some men to kidnap Dieter and bring him to France. They took him from his house and dropped him off outside a municipal courthouse in Mulhouse, France. Dieter Kronbach was finally sentenced for the murder of Kalinka Bamberski. Andre was also given a 1-year sentence for his participation in the conspiracy to kidnap Dieter. Our next story is an act of revenge that was caught live on camera. Jeff Doucette was a 25-year-old karate instructor in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He was well known and trusted in the community. The kids that he taught looked up to him and thought of him as a friend. When he offered to take 11-year-old Gary Plauche for a car ride, he told the boy's mom that they would be back within 15 minutes. She believed there was no reason to doubt him. But Jeff Doucette had other intentions. He ended up bringing Jody on a bus and took him to California. They stayed in a hotel where the karate instructor groomed the young boy. At one point, Jody requested to call his parents. Jeff allowed the student to phone his family, who then alerted the police about the call. The police were able to trace the call and rescue the child. When law enforcement alerted Jody's father, Gary Plauche, about what the karate instructor did to his child, he was disturbed. He flat out told the sheriff, Mike Barnett, that he was going to kill Jeff Doucette. The news set him on edge, as it would with any parent. That's when he decided to do some investigating of his own. Gary discovered when and where Jeff Doucette would be flying in for his trial. On the day of Jeff's flight, Gary arrived at the airport. He made his way over to a payphone to stay out of the media's sight. The WBRZ news crew was already on the scene with cameras rolling live. As Jeff arrived, he was escorted by a team of cops, including Mike Barnett. As they walked past Gary, he pulled a gun out of his boot and shot the man who kidnapped and assaulted his son. When asked why he did it, he answered very matter-of-factly with, "If someone did it to your kid, you'd do it too." In this situation, it wasn't just an act of revenge. Gary wanted to make sure that Jeff would never have the opportunity to abuse another child. In 2014, photos of Raymond Frolander's mugshot went viral. The 18-year-old's face was beaten, bruised, and severely swollen as it made its rounds on social media. But what could this felon have done to get his face rearranged before getting arrested? Well, you know it's something horrible since he ended up in this video. Raymond Frolander was a family friend of the Brownings. When Jason Browning had to go out one afternoon, he didn't think twice about leaving his 11-year-old son alone with Raymond. As far as he knew, they were going to play video games, but when he returned home, he was absolutely floored by what he saw. Jason walked in on Raymond exposing himself to his son. According to the minor's statement, Raymond had disrobed and groomed him. Jason didn't wait for any explanation. His rage flew off the handle and he started beating the 18-year-old. At one point during the altercation, Jason had Raymond pinned down and called 911. "I got him in a bloody puddle for you, officer. He is knocked out on the floor for you," he was recorded saying to the dispatcher. Jason has admitted that he would have killed Raymond that day. The only reason he stopped was because of his son. Raymond was sent to prison as his mugshot went viral around the world. Although Jason beat him to a pulp, he was never charged with a crime. As the Daytona Beach police chief said, "The father did what the father had to do." Next is one of the craziest acts of revenge in our video. But once you hear how disturbing the incident leading to the revenge is, you'll understand why this father went to such great lengths. Paramjit was a 25-year-old father of a 7-month baby girl. He had reason to believe that a 17-year-old male had assaulted his baby daughter. The case went to court, where Paramjit agreed to take a settlement. He extended an act of forgiveness and even offered the teenager a ride home from court. Little did the teenager know, Paramjit had other plans in mind. On the way home, Paramjit stopped the motorcycle he was driving and began attacking his daughter's assaulter. But this wasn't any ordinary attack. After beating him up, Paramjit tied the teenager to a tree and cut off his hands. Paramjit fled the scene, abandoning the teenager. When locals discovered the assaulter tied to a tree and beaten, they called for emergency services. Law enforcement in India handled this case much differently than law enforcement in Florida handled Jason Browning's case. Paramjit ended up getting charged with attempted murder, while his daughter's assaulter was treated like a victim. Our next story isn't one of violent revenge like the previous cases. Eduardo Gallo's story is much different because justice was his act of revenge. A group of terrorists kidnapped his 25-year-old daughter, Paula. They had demanded a $18,500 ransom for her return. Eduardo went straight to the police to get this sorted out. They came up with the money and made an arrangement with the kidnappers. However, something went extremely wrong on the day that the ransom was to be paid. A group shot at the terrorists, killing some of them on the spot. The ransom money was also left beside the corpses. Instead of returning Paula as promised, the kidnappers murdered her. Eduardo was desperate to find out who killed his daughter and seek justice. However, he wasn't getting any help from law enforcement. This wasn't going to stop him. He would dedicate his life to finding out who killed his daughter and prevent this from happening to other families. He began gathering information and researching every kidnapping case. His investigation and dedication paid off. Eventually, he discovered that a man named Francisco Zamora Arellano was responsible for his daughter's death. So what did Eduardo do with this information? He brought it straight to the very same police officer who wouldn't help him originally. On the day of Francisco's arrest, Eduardo accompanied the police so he could watch his daughter's killer get arrested. Eduardo's story is captivating because it shows that not every act of revenge has to be brutal. We can understand the fury behind any parent if someone hurts their child. If a parent trusts the justice system to penalize their child's attacker, we can only imagine the hurt and rage they would feel if that attacker got off scot-free. This is exactly what happened in our next story. Kenneth Faulkner is the father of 2 young girls who were only 4 and 7 years old at the time of this incident. Thomas Williams was a 67-year-old man who was related to the family through marriage. When Kenneth discovered that Thomas was soliciting his daughters, he trusted the legal system to keep this man off the streets. While Thomas was charged, he only received probation. To make things worse for the Faulkner family, Thomas was cocky about it. Allegedly, he winked at Kenneth when he saw him after the trial. Kenneth demanded answers. How could he do something so horrifying to the young girls? Thomas treated it like a joke, which provoked the father. Kenneth lost his cool and beat the daylights out of his daughter's attacker. Allegedly, during the attack, Kenneth threw Williams down the stairs and continued to beat him up. After the incident, Kenneth reported that he received a lot of support from people in the community. Parents will do anything to protect their children. Every parent dreams of creating the best life for their children. They want to keep them safe and help them succeed. So when someone comes along that can take them down the wrong path, we can completely understand why a parent would snap. This next story is about Barry Gilton and Lupe Mercado. Their daughter was only 17 at the time. She started spending time with a 22-year-old man named Calvin Sneed. The age difference was alarming, but it gets so much worse. Calvin was a pimp who had intentions of trafficking their underage daughter. Allegedly, the parents tried to get help from the police and child services. When their attempts were not taken seriously, they decided to take matters into their own hands. On June 4, 2012, their underage daughter was at home. The parents were aware that Calvin was on his way to pick her up, but this time, he wasn't going to take their daughter. As he approached their property in his vehicle, Barry killed him in a drive-by shooting. Since this killing was planned, the justice system treated it as racketeering. Barry Gilton received the maximum sentence since he was the one who pulled the trigger. Lupe Mercado was an accessory and could be imprisoned for up to 15 years. Other friends and family members who were in on the plan were also charged, with a total of 9 people sentenced for the murder of a sex trafficker. Our next story is rather disturbing. To be fair, after researching this case, we're still not 100% sure if the parent had reason to believe their child was assaulted or if hallucinogens played a bigger role in the events. Benita Lynn Vela was a 35-year-old mother of a 2-year-old at the time of this incident. She had a suspicion that an 18-year-old man had assaulted her son. She convinced 2 unnamed suspects to help her seek revenge. The group lured the 18-year-old back to her place and held him against his will. As they questioned him, he kept denying the accusations. At some point during this altercation, Benita ended up slicing his penis with a box cutter. Now, Benita has admitted to smoking marijuana before this altercation. However, marijuana doesn't cause people to act this way. Although she hasn't admitted to it, there are plenty of reasons why people believe harder drugs came into play. Benita wasn't served any jail time for this incident. However, she was placed on house arrest for 10 months and probation for an additional 6 months. When parents send their kids to school, they put trust in the teachers to keep them safe. So how would you react if your child told you that the teacher put hands on them? With this next story, there is no confirmation of whether the teacher actually hit the student or if the student was telling tall tales. Annika McKenzie was a 34-year-old mother at the time of the incident. Her 12-year-old daughter accused the math teacher, Catherine Lang Engelhardt, of assaulting her with a lacrosse stick. Annika entered the school with her 14-year-old niece to confront the math teacher. Catherine was standing outside of her classroom when the incident took place. Allegedly, Annika knocked the teacher to the ground and put her in a chokehold. Several other students in the hallway were also hitting and kicking the teacher while she was on the ground. Annika and her unnamed niece both got hit with assault charges, but the other students weren't charged. This wraps up our video on 9 parents who took revenge on their child's predator. We can't imagine the horror and pain these families went through. These stories show how fierce a parent's love is and what lengths they will go to make sure their children aren't living in a world filled with monsters. While many of these acts were questionable from a legal point of view, and some were quite controversial, it just goes to show that a parent will protect their offspring at any cost, even if it means jail time. Which one of these revenge stories was the most powerful to you? We want to hear your take in the comments section. Thank you for staying with us to the end. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit like, share, and subscribe.